Hey guys, it's Alex with Hammond Watch. I'm here today with the Seiko SSC747. It's a solar chronograph from the Couture line, and it is very weird. I had seen this watch in photos and in a couple of watch groups here and there pretty sparingly, as it's a pretty polarizing design. I feel like the guys that are buying these absolutely love them, and everyone else thinks it's just too odd. And I was one of those people. I'm not a huge fan of the watch overall, but I hate it much less than I thought I would after getting it in person. There are some design elements that I think would look phenomenal if brought over to some other watches in Seiko's lineup. Being a solar powered watch, it's pretty light, so it gets to kind of get away with having a 46mm case size. You do have a 12.5mm thickness with a nice 6mm crown. It's only push-pull, but you do get a screw-down case back, so you're looking at 100 meters of water resistance. The lug-to-lug is kind of hard to gauge. So if you go tip-to-tip on this kind of male lug, you have 56 millimeters. If you go from the lug hole or push hole on the side of the bracelet, you're looking at 48 millimeters. It wears smaller than 56 for sure. But you're not going to have very many strap options to play with. Not only is it integrated, so it's going to be tricky to find something that fits, but the strap matches the watch's design perfectly. I don't know that you'd be able to find anything aftermarket that really accomplishes the same thing. I doubt there's too much of a demand for it. The top of the strap is all the way flared out to 30 millimeters and tapers down to 20, which is really nice. And it's a soft, pliable material. I think Seiko's been doing a really good job with their rubber and silicone straps recently. You also have a nice taper of its thickness, starting at 6 millimeters and then coming all the way down to 4, making sure that it's got enough heft to keep the watch in place, but doesn't overpower your wrist or affect your mobility in any way. And in general, I think accomplishes that very well. The case back, pretty basic, sterile with just basic specifications. You have a V192 movement. That's a plus or minus 15 seconds a month. You're also looking at a 6-month power reserve, and you're going to get the low battery indicator, so your seconds hand is going to do a little bit of jumping when the watch needs to get a charge. The biggest surprise in handling the watch is really how much I enjoy the camouflage dial. And I think the indices are really well executed as well. But camo is kind of a fun print. It can definitely get a little goofy. So I really like that they kept the tones relatively similar and instead played a little bit more with texture. You have some flat spots, you have some sunburst, and it gives it kind of a low-key flavor. It's not quite in your face, but at the same time, when you look at it, it's definitely not taking itself too seriously. I think if you use this type of dial and some of the more popular solar divers, they would be absolute hits. The indices are really nice too. You've got kind of a vertical brush, and then on the sides, a really nice polish that plays with the light a little. There is a painted black strip in each, just to help with added visibility. I do wish that particular section of each index had been loomed, because in general I'm just not overly impressed with that, which is kind of weird when you're handling a Seiko and that's a weak point of the watch. Being that they use Seiko's proprietary Lumibrite, where there is lume, it's very legible and going to be pretty long lasting considering the small amount of material used. But all in all, this isn't the best application I've ever seen. I'm not entirely sure where they only chose to do a dot at 12, 3, 6, and 9. I think it would have been nice to have them for every index. That said, it's kind of an oddball watch, so I guess it comes with the territory. So outside of the dial pattern and those indices, everything else on this watch just feels a little bit awkward and forced at times. To start, that date window is unnecessary. It's about the most forced positioning I've ever seen of one. there's almost overlap with this bolted down kind of ring that runs around your subdial at 6 o'clock. I think the subdials are incredibly odd. You have kind of a very plain Jane at 3 o'clock, then a big bolted on seconds counter at 6, and then your running seconds at 9 with a brushed ring around it. They just feel like they all belong on different watches. And if you've ever seen a car that just felt like too many people had a hand in it, and like they couldn't stop adding lines, like they just wanted to over-design it, that's very much what this watch feels like. I don't mind the hands, they're pretty different, and I like when you skeletonize half of the hands on a chronograph so you can make sure that subdials are always visible. But at the same time, if that hours hand is in your way, that little section of skeletonized hand isn't really going to be helpful in any way. So it doesn't come off very well thought out. The tachometer running around the outside of the watch is relatively mundane, with a scalloped edge, which in general kind of goes along with all the other curves of the watch. There's just so many of them. I wish that this was a little bit simpler of a design. If this was 3 kind of matching or cohesive subdials, and then you had a traditional lug, I think this watch could end up actually being pretty attractive. I really do like the little pop of orange, and in general I'm a fan of solar chronographs. Along with being a 60-minute chronograph and having the running 24-hour dial as well as your seconds, you do get a power reserve with this watch. Your indicator is below. You can actuate it by hitting the lower pusher for the chronograph when it's not running and tracking time. And I think those are always a pretty nice feature. But when you look at how much is going on with the watch, when you break it down, all you really have is a 24-hour time zone and a 60-minute counter, and that's really it. It appears that there's a lot going on with this watch and with the dial, but it's still a relatively simple concept. So here's the watch on my 7.5 to 7.75 inch wrist, and it's surprisingly comfortable. As I mentioned earlier, the strap is really nice and pliable. I usually struggle with integrated end links or watches that come with kind of a pre-curved strap. I'm very flat on top of my wrist, so a lot of times we'll dig in on the sides. This watch being so tall lug to lug, there's actually a fair amount of space there, and it feels good. It's light because you have the solar movement, and in general I don't mind it. At the same time, I don't know if it's a watch that I would actually wear. It's just got so much weirdness going on, but I really do hope that they take this dial and apply it to some other watches, because I think there's some really cool possibilities there. So let's talk about the pricing a little bit. Retail on these watches runs $495, which I think is a bit overpriced. That said, I think that most Seikos are overpriced in a retail setting. Luckily, there's always ways to find deals for their watches. Amazon sells these right now at $265, and if you go on eBay, you'll find brand new versions for $200. If you go pre-owned, I think you can get right around the $150 mark. Being a sapphire crystal, you don't really have to worry about hardlex scratches, and overall, if the design speaks to you, or you're looking for something really funky as a change-up piece, I do think that this is a viable candidate. You are getting a solar chronograph, a nice crystal, a unique, interesting design, an original design, at a relatively low price point. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video looking at this incredibly weird watch. Give us a thumbs up if you did. Also consider subscribing. I'm putting watch content out weekly, and I hope to see you in the next one.